Wholeness and welcome. This is Josh Dippold from Integrating Presence, and today I have with me a buddy, and we're just going to call him Beta Ray Bill, also AKA Egg Drop. Um, so I think maybe that'll be a good place to start. What the heck is Beta Ray Bill? What's that mean?
Oh, Beta Ray Bill was a comic book character from the Marvel Universe created by writer and artist Walter Simonson. For the time, the only character that was able to defeat Thor, and in Thor's Hamill, uh, whoever defeats Thor shall have the power of Thor. So Odin granted Beta Ray Bill his own hammer called Stormbringer, which is featured in the Marvel cinematic universe, but the character Beta Ray Bill is not.
And obviously, it's not in the Norse mythology either, right?
No.
And of course, I just thought immediately of Beta Ray, or no, Beta. Remember Betamax, the alternative that never took off to VHS for any old schoolers out there. And then Ray, like there's Billy Ray Cyrus, And then let's see, Beta. Now it's the beta males, right?
He introduced me to people like Neil Kramer, or just alternative ways of thinking, definitely different from the mainstream. And one thing I really liked about Neil Kramer is his idea of suspending your belief or your worldview for a time, maybe even zooming out to maybe see things from a different vantage point. And maybe in that way, you might be able to see maybe a fuller picture or a bigger picture, or be on your way to see as many worldviews as possible. See all the angles, if you will. Not to mean that you have to completely give up your current worldview, but just to be able to suspend it for a while, to maybe try to see things in a different way without the filter of your current worldview.
And that's what I was going to say. I mean, the common term, I guess, now is red pilling, right? When from the Matrix movie, where yes, that's a great way to put it. Although that could be even another program, I guess. But just all the different things in the world that are going on that I guess are behind the scenes and connected on some of that stuff too. Now, recently I published a article on my site called about Cahokia Mounds, and the first article is about the Pleiades star system, and the second article is actually pretty profound and a lot of different it's hard for me to describe, and I won't go too much into it, but if anybody's interested, I think Egg Drop here would like to talk about the first article, which I'm mostly in agreement with, that there's a lot of holes in it. But I did want to mention one compliment is that, tying back to my site, Integrate Presence, that it is kind of about meditation and wisdom. And there's a section on discernment, different areas of study for discernment. And since I don't have a formal Dharma training, I don't have any kind of certification or whatever, what I've done is I've opened myself up for criticism and questioning of all sorts at all times. And for whatever reason, a lot of people really haven't done this so much, and this is what I respect about Beta Ray Bill here, is that he will come in and use the things we talk about and share to develop his discernment. And so while sometimes it can get a little heated and emotional, I really appreciate not only the opportunity to keep developing discernment, keeps me on my toes, and it keeps me accountable, and it helps refine what I'm sharing, enable for the quality to increase, right? So invite questions, investigation, and discernment, although there's more helpful guidelines for that than others. But again, like I said, just open floor. So yeah, if you want to jump into that or anything else.
Well, when it comes to trying to discern what emotions are, something like fear, I've heard that fear is an illusion. However, if an illusion by definition is deception, how can you really know? How can you really know that fear it is an illusion? Fear it seems to be an emotion that we all can identify. Even some animals feel fear, and it might have to do with self-preservation when it comes to fight or flight mechanisms. So even though fear might have a negative connotation, I see it as maybe an essential for life to preserve itself and to expand.
That's interesting. I guess the way I would put it is the fight or flight. That's just like an inbuilt protection mechanism in our nervous system. Um, for me, fear doesn't really, that's the label we give it afterwards. Um, so if we're actually fighting for our lives or running for our lives, there's really not much time to be in fear because you're acting. You're either fighting or running for your lives. Now, what I would consider fear would be um, when we don't necessarily have to fight for our lives or run for our lives, but there's this emotion or this kind of sense that we might need to, right? So we're not actually running or fighting, but there's this kind of overlay or this kind of sense that we might need to, and even though it's not happening or really doesn't need to happen, because if it needed to happen, it would be happening, right? So that's what I would consider fear. Now, I would definitely agree that we can learn from that, and we can use that to help. I mean, everything's an opportunity or can be turned into an opportunity. So that I would totally agree with. And I think it was just a semantic thing here, possibly. And I want to say that it's not wrong to be in fear either. Um, it's definitely okay to be in fear and to feel it and learn from it and grow from it, because if somebody's already in fear and you say, well, you shouldn't be in fear, well, a lot of times that can just add more fear, or it could just add more challenges on top of it already. So I guess the thing would be, well, how do we deal with that? What do we do with that? How do we work with that practically in life for benefit? And I say, well, one of the things would be to know that you're safe enough to feel the fear, or go to a place where you're safe enough to just feel that in the body and experience that and ask it questions, scrutinize it, feel it. But if it gets too overwhelming, then we need to call out to a friend, put our attention on other objects that will distract us in healthy ways. Put your attention on your feet, to go for a walk. There's all kinds of different ways to deal with it when it gets too overwhelming.
When it comes to the idea of fear, whether it's an illusion or not, historically on a global scale, it seems to have been some sort of power that people have been able to tap into. And when I say people, I'm talking about those who have managed to have power over a significant of people, and to even cause them to go to war with other groups of people, using the idea, well, we don't want to lose our land to these invaders. And that argument may be being used on both sides, saying if there were two countries at battle. And it's something that has been a tool that has never gone away in this day and age. There's still wars all over the globe, as well as what might be seen as psychological wars. Is fear the energy or the motivator behind that? And because people may believe that fear is a real thing, is that cause for them to maybe give into the fear? And when it comes to, is it possible to eradicate this? Um, History has shown us no, although there's been plenty of maybe spiritual insights that there might be a coming of some sort of teacher that help guide us into the light. For me, that's still just a story, but my beliefs are are never absolute. They change depending on the information I'm exposed to. And if I am able to witness a change in fear somehow being conquered or even controlled, and well-being to all life on earth is more predominant, then change my view.
So the last part there, real quick again, you said if something changes, you'll change your view with fear. Is that what you?
No, meaning I will change my view of fear, that it's something that can be maybe
Oh,
put in check.
okay. So I can just talk from personal experience, but before I do that, it is very common, at least I see it, and I hear other people say the same thing, that fear can be used as a control mechanism, right? When people are in fear, they don't want to be in fear. And so somebody comes along and offers them a way to alleviate or allay that fear, then they will take some choices that they normally wouldn't take, right? Just because, well, it's just a common axiom that people are easier when they're in fear. And so people in power with less than, ideal intentions have used that, like Larry said, and he gave the definition of war. And yeah, for me personally, fear is, and then we've got a park ranger or something driving by here.
Possibly fear mongering. No, I'm just kidding.
Right. So, if anybody's ever experienced paranoia, that's like, I guess it's similar to fear, but it's like, in round two, another vehicle. But the upside to paranoia, I guess, way I would experience it or explain paranoia would be, it's like extreme fear, or it's kind of like off the charts, ridiculous amount of things, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong all the time either. But one of the lessons I've heard that paranoia can teach is it can say to, hey, pay attention to your mind, I'm trying to get your attention, listen to me. One of the other things it can also teach is there needs to be a different choice made here. The way I'm going about this, maybe I should not do that. Maybe I should choose a different way. And so, unfortunately or fortunately, in this system we have this polarity, right? So for whatever extreme, there's the other extreme. So one of the benefits I've found about experiencing paranoia is that is like the extreme of fear. So that's as a reference point for how extreme it can get. So then you have the other opposite of the spectrum where, you know, there's just peace and love, right? And there's fearlessness. And so if you know the extreme of one, well then it's you only have one side of the spectrum to go from at that point. Now, I'm not recommending people go straight out and try to get paranoid just so they can have that as an experience to become fearless. That seems a little ridiculous, and actually that is really ridiculous. However, I guess it could be leveraged towards fearlessness. But I want to just talk about maybe more of the standard ways to become fearless, to increase courage, to become empowered, and to become, where fear isn't a controlling mechanism as much. So working with it in experience is great. For me, I found loving kindness, right, as a formal practice. And what this does is it become harmless to anything and everything. So if you go out of your way to not even harm a gnat, or even something that's inconvenient, like if a spider comes along and you have to take it outside, or even going through vegetables, and there's these little aphids on there that I could barely even see, and it can't really even tell if they're dead or not because they're in such a gorged state from eating. So these are organic vegetables, by the way, and that just means the food is edible, that it won't kill the bugs. So it's real. It's good to eat. So then you have to move these little aphids, see if they're alive or not, and then spend this extra time taking them out. But that's a little extreme maybe, but The point is the intent of non-harming. And so when that happens, we give this gift of fearlessness to everyone around us, right? Because they can sense that we're not a threat and that we're not going to harm. And so it gives them the space where they can take that pressure off of being guarded and worried about, oh, is this person out to do such and such, and so when the intent comes, it's all about intent, right? Because if you step on an ant and you didn't intend to kill it, it's still death, but you didn't intend to kill it. Because if you would have seen it and you had the intent, oh, I don't want to kill that, you would have stepped around it. But this is like harmlessness, and it gives this gift where people are safe enough to open up and explore and just talk about anything, be any way they want, come as they are, be as they will, and feel. Sometimes whatever we're going through is unpleasant, and knowing that it's okay to feel and face pain. And again, when it gets too overwhelming, there's other strategies that can happen. So wow, now I've almost lost the entire thread about. Was there a specific about fear again?
Well, yeah, I could add to that idea when it comes to an individual's intent to be harmless. We can have a certain level of control of that, but for the person who's on the receiving end, we can't really control how they'll react, despite what the giver's intention. For example, someone might believe that it would be beneficial to somebody to maybe not to be on so many pharmaceuticals, and maybe even point out that while your side effects or possibly harm that the receiving person's experiencing from all these pharmaceuticals, and it's quite possibly for this person on the receiving end to interpret that and become fearful. So despite a person's good intentions, we really do not have control over another individual's response. And it's one of those things that maybe chance plays into.
It's the chance thing I'm just going to shelf, but it's a really good point of, that's why feedback and dialogue is so important, because, what I feel might be non-harming to someone actually might be harming. So that's why it's also important to have open dialogue and feedback, right? And also this idea of like self-containment too. So there's sometimes when I know that I can be around people and some of their stuff can come up just automatically. Stuff they're not ready to handle, stuff they can get triggered by real easily. And so does it really do them any good for me to be around them at that point? And so that's when I just need to step back. And take, but the thing with the intent too, right? So yeah, this is a practice, right? It's not like a commandment, or it's something it's said to check out in our own experience, right? To see if we see benefits from it. It's not like a thou shalt, right?
Right, and I would say a possible, maybe not a resolution, but maybe a way to move forward between this example of a giver and a receiver is they might question their current worldviews and may want to explore different ways of thinking.
Absolutely, and that's why one of the things I've always been blessed with since a young age is having more of an open mind, right? So, I mean, sometimes that can get people in trouble, but a lot of times it goes for their benefit. It's like balance too. Now, going back to the non-harming thing, I will say that I'm still in agreement with the what is it called, the non-aggression principle. There might be a better word for it, where people are obviously allowed to defend their lives and their loved ones if they're aggressed upon, but they're not really allowed to harm anyone else. But when their life is threatened, then they have the right to protect themselves and their loved ones. Now, for me personally, right now I don't have any immediate family like wife and kids, so this is kind of I don't have to deal with this situation, so I can right now. So I choose just non-harm all the way. Now I can't recommend that for everybody, because everybody's not ready to take such an extreme leap right away, right? Because of whatever reason. So, Beta Ray Bill here is a first generation American, and I really love his perspective on a lot of things that I've kind of lost perspective on in this country. Because he comes at it from a different place than a lot of people circles I run in, and so I still support fully Second Amendment. Don't want to get too political here, but even though I won't own a gun or use one anymore, I still support the right for other people to do so. Primarily because usually what dictators do in other countries, the first thing they do is confiscate everybody's. And obviously we're not going to go up against like the national, armies or something, little, sidearms and stuff. But it's a psychological thing, right? It's a psychological thing there that really makes all the difference. And it's all about responsible use of it. So anybody who's a responsible, law-abiding citizen that will use it just to protect and not initiate force, then eventually we'll be at a state of consciousness where we won't need. I mean, they'll march these guns out on like special days or something. Like look how primitive we used to be. There's a gun, people used it to shoot things, and it'll be like a history lesson or something. But unfortunately, the state of consciousness that we're at now isn't at that level, and so I still feel they're necessary to some degree for certain population members of people that are gonna, be legit and upstanding with it. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that. So throw some practicality things in there too, and about building bridges from, where we're at now to complete non-harm.
Yeah, when it comes to the idea of the non-aggression principle, it's something I've been thinking about it exists in the realm of ideas, but can it really be implemented in our physical reality? Again, there may be the intent of not harming somebody, but let's say from an economic standpoint, we have business A and business B. In free market capitalism, they are competing, and if business A puts a product on sale, are they not trying to gain more customers and maybe even steal away customers from business B? Now, business B has a shortage on employees as well as business A. Business B offers maybe a hiring bonus, but business A doesn't. Is that not a competition? And does it necessarily have to be seen as aggressive? I don't know.
This is a fascinating question, because when we get into harm and non-harmony, there's subtle and subtler layers, and gets subtler and subtler, right? And then when we start connecting, certain business activities with certain things too, and connecting the money trails, if there's involvement in war, gray markets, black markets, it gets really complicated really quick. So this is where it does kind of have to come to, I think, more of ideological thing, where we just have to do the best we can and not go too deep into it, to where where it's practical to analyze, and when it's not practical to analyze it. But that is, the culture here in the States is or at least was, and we're kind of in a transition period now, built on competition. I'm sure there's some competition official, but I'm thinking it's time to explore this idea of cooperation, that goes away from this thing of gangster capitalism, and now I obviously don't think socialism and communism is the answer either, because we don't really have a true capitalism. It's kind of gangster capitalism, where it's like growth for the sake of growth is the ideology of a cancer cell, right? So if you're just doing growth because of growth, I don't really see the point, just to make shareholders money. Okay, well, I'm not saying you shouldn't make money in business. I mean, that's obviously what it's there for. But it's these cutthroat practices, these ethical things. And then you get into the whole even more, like now they have these, social responsibilities, they say, or I forget the exact term for, but, we talked about this before, some of them are kind of joke. I mean, they will do kind of certain good things, but then, the track record and the other things they're involved with, Now I don't know for sure, so I mean, don't hold me to this exactly, but I, it seems like where there's really the opportunity to do good with investing in money is in private companies, private equity, where you can individually vet the people in the business to know their intentions and their goodness and their track record, you know, and how they're going to play out. But, you know, it's a lot easier just to buy a stock, right? So that's another thing. I think that's enough for now. I'll pass it over.
Oh, when it comes to free market capitalism, I want to distinguish that from what I would call crony capitalism, meaning government's support of corporations, especially, and an example would be the pandemic. Now, who decided that small businesses had to shut down, yet corporations stayed open? Giving people, a limited place where to shop. Amazon.com, as well as Walmart, Target, Whole Foods, they probably made a lot more money, while the mom and pops, small businesses, even though they were provided with a loan from the government. And where does the government get the money for loans? Well, essentially, they borrow it, and it has to be paid back by future taxpayers. But for these small businesses to be shut down, yet corporations like Walmart stayed open, that would be my example of crony capitalism.
Well, not only that, but then, they have a corporate welfare, I think some people call it, right? So, but this has been in the works for a long time, right? Constantly pushing out the small guy, making, barriers tougher, making regulations more and more, and consolidating all the wealth and power into corporations. We kind of know all this. I'm not saying corporations are bad in and of themselves. It's just kind of the way things are structured now. And, I was curious too about the, if this was really about health so much, why are the fast food places to stay open? Now I get it. Some people are, are hard to make ends meet, and they don't have the time to cook and stuff. But, it just doesn't seem, I don't know. I think that's enough to say about that.
So I've been contemplating this idea that everything changes, and I can see how it may work for a lot of things, but I don't see it as a blanket, universal truth. For example, change in my life is the more I'm exposed to ideas, the more I may change my worldview. But an example of things that don't change, I think we can see in math. For instance, no matter how big the circumference of a circle is, the diameter is always going to be half the value or twice the value of the radius. The number 0 is always going to be the number 0. And so I've adopted this idea that although many things do change, there's also things that don't. And it's possible that these two different ideas exist in our reality.
It's fascinating, I never considered the mathematical equations, right? So, this is just off the cuff here. I probably ought to sit with this before I speak on it, but this is, I don't. I think maybe what might be referred to is the three seals in Buddhism, the dukkha, anicca, anatta, right? The dukkha being stress, unsatisfactoriness, and suffering, and anatta being not self. And we won't go into that because that's the most kind of subtle, complex thing. I guess we could, but the anicca, that's what's commonly translated as, what is it? Everything's changes. I mean, was spoken to. What is, help me out with the word it's commonly translated
impermanence?
As impermanent. Okay, so I'm not really fond of that translation so much either. The way I like to explain that word, and then I'll come back to the equations here, is, okay, so trying to arrange things in our external life, conditions in our external lives, the way we want them, right? Have everything lined up in life. to how we want it, and then that's how we're going to have lasting happiness. I mean, we have this fallacy. We think that if we only have, the right bank account, the right living situation, maybe a right partner, maybe having things go smoothly, have a daily routine, so where I kind of know what to expect, move through my life fairly easily, get accomplished what I need to accomplish, and that's gonna do it for me. I'm gonna be happy that way. Well, yes, to a certain degree. However, this is not a solution, a long-term solution for happiness, because in the long term, it's going to be impossible to maintain conditions exactly the way we want them, right? In the long run. So when we're under this kind of delusion that we can maintain external conditions the way we want them in the long run, and that's the way we're going to achieve happiness, that's kind of a setup for dukkha, which is the unsatisfactoriness, the stress, and extreme aversion, suffering, right? And so we're kind of under this illusion or delusion that we can keep things the way we want. So, but all it really takes is just that recognition that that's not possible. And so when we align with that truth, that we can't really maintain things, I know I've said that so many times now, to the way for external conditions the way we want them in the long run, then we can just realize that when things happen in life, that's just the way this system's structured, that we can't have control of the time, we can't have it a lot, and because of this, we can expand our worldview to see that when we do see stress and unsatisfactoriness and suffering in the world, that it kind of ties into this idea that people are trying to do this, and when they realize that that's not possible, and then they get stressful and upset about it, and whatever. So now going back to the things change, so that's one of the reasons I don't like the impermanence translation of that. And so I'm sure there could be constants and stuff. Now the mathematical stuff, it's hard because that is born in the mind, right? So there is no, I mean, I can't go and pick up a zero, right? I can't go pick up a math equation, hold it in my hand. In physical reality, I'm not saying it doesn't exist, because it exists in the mind, right? Now, you get into deeper, stranger things like, well, are there alternative realities or other planes of existence where we can experience things where that equation doesn't exist, or maybe it exists in a different way. And I think we talked about different number systems, number-based systems, right? We have a 10-based system, and there might be that's all beyond my pay grade, and maybe losing people here, but I mean, perhaps you can put it in a way that can more understood here. I guess that'd be the way I look at it. But so I'm not taking anything off the table that's not constant. I think that it's said in Buddhism, if there is enlightenment, what happens? This classic thing: is there a self? Will I exist after I'm enlightened? Won't I exist after I'm enlightened? Will I both exist and not exist after I'm enlightened, or after there's enlightenment? Or will I neither exist nor not exist? And I think the historical Buddha said, well, none of that even applies. And so there's just no reference point. There's no words. There's no, for me anyway, you can only approximate that. There's really nothing that can be said, and it really can't be understood by mere logic alone, right? So I think that's plenty for the time being.
Yeah, I just want to add that,
oh, yes.
that the Western system of logic, base and math, is really just a tool that people have used to try to, prove facts, where that might not be the only worldview that exists. There's plenty of worldviews that are really dependent on the idea of logic, and I just want to be conscious of that. There's just so many different ways of thinking or perceiving what may or may not be reality.
And this is the gold of life is deep things like this. However, a lot of people aren't in situations to contemplate all this stuff. This is where the philosophy stuff comes in, Yeah, the logic is fascinating, but as you agree, there's things beyond logic too, right?
Yes, and I would say those things that are beyond logic is more based on speculation and faith. There may be things that we can't prove in our reality because they are beyond. They're not part of the physical. They're metaphysical.
That's right. And so that's when we look at them through the reference point of logic and rhetoric. And in addition to that, I would say that's totally right. We have to really, tap into that. We have to see it and know it for ourselves. We can't really be told about it. You can tell somebody about something and speculate about it, or do this and that. But ultimately, for that type of thing to become, it to to be experienced, it has to be seen and known for oneself, right? Because because I mean, you just can't go talk about a bunch of woo-woo stuff and just have somebody say, "Oh, well, that's just how it is." I mean, now that's how it is, and that's all the end of it. No, not at all. It's that has to be seen and known for oneself. And then even when you do see something, there's just so many other things that could be in the way that it's, that's not necessarily, what is it? It's not necessarily what you see is what you know when you talk about certain years like this. And knowing, what is the branch of philosophy about knowing and truth? I think there's a special word for it, but I always forget it. And that's a whole nother topic. I know we've talked tons about truth.
Oh, when it comes to our natural curiosity, or maybe I should just talk about my natural curiosity.
Sure.
How do I experience things? How do I know things? Well, there's this idea I could really only know what I experience, what I feel, and what I think. And I've known that ever since I've been conscious. I've always had this natural curiosity to know what there is and what may be beyond. What things do we not know? How much do we not know? And what drives this curiosity? Can we explain that the chemical processes in our brain equals to that, of consciousness? I don't know if it can be or not, but does it even really matter? I mean, to me, no. What really matters to me is just to continue, I guess, my the expansion of my knowledge through my personal experience, beliefs, ideas that I've come across from not just people of this time, but learning about history all over the world.
And this is what they call epistemology, right? I think that isn't that the branch that deals with knowing?
Yeah, it's. I believe it has to do with what do we know, how do we know something, and how we can justify that we know.
And then empiricism, right? That's what we know for ourselves, right? Through the senses.
Empiricism is more having to do with hard facts, what can be proved with, I guess, logic. But
Gotcha.
yeah.
It is. It really is. And in the Buddhist teachings, the 7 factors of awakening. The second one is, or the first energizing factor of those is investigation. And so it's investigating reality. And how do we do that? Well, like was said, it's like through our experiences, how we know, asking questions, keep looking into things. Then that curiosity that drives it. So that desire to do so, that intent to do so, the persistence to do so, and then developing discernment. These 4 things are called the 4 roads to power, or the Iddhipadas in the Buddhist teachings. So we've got a helicopter coming over. Well, is there anything else we wanted to chat about today, or should we?
Do you want to address the idea of light, or should we leave it for part 2?
Well, use that as a little preview that working on a podcast, and if anybody's would like to chime in with this, you're welcome to do a short audio recording and email it to me, or send it to me electronically through my site integratingpresence.com. The email address is integratingpresence@protonmail.com. You can just send it that way as well. And the 2 questions are simple, or short anyway. What is light and how do you know? So I've got a few people that have recorded again, looking for that upcoming podcast for what is light and how do you know. And anyone who comes across this audio, the show on Wisdom or the podcast, you're welcome to contact me. Send in your response through audio, and more than likely to be include a podcast. What is light and how do you know? All right, Billy Ray.
Well,
Not Billy Ray. Beta Ray Bill. Yep. Anything else you want to close up with?
Yeah, I just want to add to, if there's any terminology that I used wrong, please correct me. I don't mind being critiqued. Just anybody who has a comment or opinion, whether they're agreeing or opposing, or just want to ask more questions, maybe next time.
Yes. So you're welcome to do that in the comments section of there'll be the show notes on the blog post on my website, integratingpresence.com. So, or however you want to get in contact with me, and then more than likely I'll put them on the page and share them with it. And if you don't want it shared, let me know, and I'll just do that private feedback too. And if there's anything else you want to hear about for a part 2 or anything like that, feel free to reach out as well. All right. May you all be blessed with an ideal and optimal day. Bye now.